Way back to the SEC. I've been really looking forward to talking about Missouri football for a number of different reasons. This Missouri team, I think, is on the verge of something special. And if you look at what they've done the past 2 seasons, back-to-back 10-plus wins, and, Vegas says that they're only at 7.5, but I think that's really underestimating what they can do here. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a phenomenal recruiter, somebody that I don't think gets a lot of credit for what he's done, and I think often gets overshadowed by the Texas of the world, by the Alabamas, etc. But now that turn some heads and win some football games, and particularly winning the football games that they should be winning. And the reason I say should be winning is because, quite frankly, Missouri has a pretty generous schedule this year. I mean, I go back and I look here. You start off the year with a laugher versus Central Arkansas. You make your way down to Kansas, which should be a win. And your first real test is going to be at home versus South Carolina week 4, which gets you even more excited because when you look at this Missouri schedule, granted, yeah, that you do got to play the typical SEC. You got to play the South Carolina. You got to play Alabama. Auburn's always going to be a tough team. And you play Texas A&M. But what really excites me about them the most is the fact that they don't have a road game until October 18th at Auburn. So you start off the year playing a ton of home games. And for the most part, your toughest challenge on the road really is going to be that Auburn game. I mean, I look and I say, granted, Oklahoma is tough and Arkansas is going to be tough too, that week 13 and 14. But overall, there's a lot to be excited about here. And granted, there are going to be some question marks, right? I mean, yes, you're going to miss Brady Cook. Yes, you're going to miss Luther Burden. Yes, you're going to miss some of these guys on the defensive front, particularly in the secondary, which obviously is devastating. However, they were really active in the transfer portal once again, bringing in 17 transfers in the winter portal, 10 of them which are 4-star prospects, which is something to be really excited about too. And obviously a big risk in a sense too, right? Because Missouri has kind of decided to lean in a little bit more in the portal, and probably rightfully so to some degree, right? Because, when you're a program like Missouri, you are going to have to sit there and take some calculated risks and some chances, especially when you're constantly putting in that second echelon. And what I mean is like you're good, but you're not great. And in order for them to be great in the SEC, they're going to have to take some calculated chances and moves in order for them to really kind of instill themselves into being, one of the top teams in the SEC. But according to both On3 and 24/7 Sports, they have the number 7 ranked transfer class in the country, which really speaks volumes to what Eli Drinkwitz and this whole staff have really done over the past couple seasons. And granted, it took a while for them to really get going, right? I mean, he's going into his 6th year now. 5-5 when he took over for that season when he took over for Barry Odom. Then 6-7, 2 years in a row after that, and then once that 2023 season really hit, going 11-2, and then he got a big contract extension that goes all the way to 2028, where he makes about $9 million per year now. So what you got going for you, right, is the fact that you have a lot of stability with Missouri. They've historically been patient with a lot of their coaches, and they've also made a ton of great hires. I mean, I go back and think of, Gary Pinkel too, who, is a legend at Missouri. And that's the one thing that they do have going for you. It's a very stable program. He's done a phenomenal job at instilling a culture there and being disciplined. Now, granted, we can talk about some of the miscalculations, particularly in the game management portion of Missouri football. But at the same time, when you look at this program kind of full circle, there's a lot more positives than negatives. I mean, if you want to go to the offensive side of the football, as somebody who primarily covers Penn State, I'm really fascinated with what they're going to do with Bo Pribula. Nittany Lion, 571 rushing yards, 10 scores, is going to be a dangerous threat for them running the ball. And then you pair him with Ahmad Hardy, who rushed for over 1,300 rushing yards at Louisiana Monroe last year. And I think is somebody who's physical, he's tough, he's going to break tackles, he's going to get big gains, and he's going to be a threat and somebody who's going to be really difficult to stop. And when you have that 1-2 punch, I think they can really do a lot of exciting things, which obviously is completely different from what they've done in the past couple seasons in terms of having an aerial attack. And, when you go back and think of Brady Cook, he was just slinging it over and over and over again. And before I get too mixed in with the offense here, the one thing I really want to point out, it's something I've always really admired about Missouri football, particularly in the past couple years or so, is they always find different ways to win, right? That's the one thing I think you always have to give them credit for. Now, are they not necessarily – I wouldn't necessarily sit there and argue that they're necessarily known as a defensive, juggernaut or anything. I'm not sitting there throwing that out there. But at the same time, too, when you come off double-digit wins, you have to find different ways to win. And when I sit down and look at it, out of their last 11 one-score games, they've won 10 of those games. 10 out of 11 of one-score games. I mean, that's an incredible stat and a testament to what they've done as a program, in full too, because when you go back and especially now in this playoff era, those are the games and conversations that ultimately the committee is going to be talking about. Now, granted, how much weight is going to be put into shrink the schedule and all those things moving forward? That still, beats everybody. I mean, as of right now, it doesn't really have too much of an impact. So in theory, if, Missouri does have another 10-3 season, you probably would be pretty close to making the playoff, maybe or maybe not, depending on exactly who those two losses are. But at the same time, too, I think one thing is going to surprise some people about Missouri this year is I think they're going to be a lot more balanced this year. And I really think they are going to utilize Hardy. They are going to utilize Bo. Now, granted, Sam Horn's also in kind of that quarterback battle too, but I think it's pretty obvious that when you bring in Bo Corbella, he's probably going to end up being the starter and someone who's a little bit more experienced, someone who's had a decent amount of reps at Penn State. I mean, obviously, when you're behind Drew Allar, you're only going to get so many of them, but it seems like it's really a good situation for him in general too, especially when you know that Missouri is going to have a lot of resources around you to really be a strong program, moving forward too. Not to mention he's a younger kid too, so that's going to help if they get a season or two out of him. But in any event, when you look at the wide receiver core, I think they can even do some things there. I love Kevin Coleman Jr., kid from Mississippi State, has just under 1,000 yards receiving. I think he's a phenomenal kid, somebody that's going to really be able to extend plays, somebody that can catch in space, and somebody who's a pretty solid route runner. I think that's something that they're going to have to be utilizing moving forward in order for them to really kind of push the envelope in terms of really kind of building this momentum too. And, even doing the research on this video, I was really surprised, honestly, that they only had them at 7.5, 8 wins. And granted, I do think there are some things that I would seriously be concerned about. Now, granted, for example, they rank 100 out of 136th in returning production, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. So yes, you are going to have to rely on a lot of transfers, and that seems to be an ongoing narrative with teams all throughout the country. But especially when you just had 10 wins the season before, that's just something that's going to get brought up over and over and over again, whether you like it or not. But at the same time, too, when you've seen what this coaching staff has done, it definitely gives you kind of pause to necessarily sit there and say, oh, yeah, this is going to be a total problem, or this is totally going to be an issue. I mean, granted, I'm more concerned about the offensive line. I think that's really where things are going to get a little bit difficult, right? Because at least on the offensive line, most of them are relatively unproven, aside from Caden Green, who's going to be the guard. And I mean, all things considered, too, the transition from Blake Baker being your coordinator to Corey Batoon went pretty well, at least defensively. Mizzou ranked 19th in total defense and 20th in scoring defense, despite all the turnover even from last season too. So it's not necessarily a quote-unquote brand new thing that they've had turnover from year after year after year. However, it's worth pointing out that just, with all these highs and lows that they've had, they've found different ways to win, even last season too. I mean, I go back and think of the Arkansas game where it felt like nobody can put up any points at all, but ultimately their defense kind of carried them and be able to getting that win. And granted, Arkansas is not a sexy win or anything like that, but an SEC win is an SEC win. I don't care if you beat Mississippi State or if you beat Vanderbilt or if you beat Bama. But in any event, those are the type of games that ultimately you're really going to have to sit there and really wonder, can they continue to pull off those wins again? Because even when I look at the defensive side of the ball again, they are, returning a handful of starters. I mean, they got about 6 or 7 of them that are returning, but they've also brought in a number of FBS starters that I think Mizzou fans should really be excited about. I mean, I go and think of the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, Josiah Trotter from West Virginia. That kid can ball, had a shit ton of tackles last year, and somebody who I think is going to be an immediate asset to them too. I also think of star safety Jalen Kellalone from UNLV, who I think is going to be a really big deal, and I think is going to be one of those things too where, at least defensively speaking, they have a solid amount of depth, at least in the secondary, but I think it's going to be also one of those things too where if we end up going back and having a conversation in terms of where things kind of fell off the tracks in terms of Mizzou football, that's going to be one of the first things that come to my mind. Because at least watching some games, particularly down the stretch, I definitely had some concerns with their secondary. And, at the same time too, that this is a team that's still kind of putting things together, not so much the culture or the atmosphere or the discipline or anything like that. I'm talking strictly just in terms of, year after year, figuring out what exactly is going to be the recipe for their long-term success. Now, granted, they've done a phenomenal job finding different ways to win, but at the same time, they're going to have to specialize in one specific thing if they really want to win national championships too, or even, being able to win an SEC championship for that matter. But, when you look at their recruiting, I mean, it's nothing special necessarily. I mean, right now they're 18th in 2025, 21st in 2024, 36th in 2023 with only 4 stars. And then even in 2022, they were 18th. So they've been relatively stagnant in terms of the recruiting trail, right? But as evidence is shown, as what I pointed out there, they've relied essentially on the transfer portal for the most part to get from point A to point B. And again, I'm really excited about this program. This is a staff that I think has really done a phenomenal job being able to develop players, being able to maximize what they have, and most importantly, being able to tailor different game strategies to their immediate strengths. So although they are only projected to win 7.5 games, I am feeling a lot more optimistic about this team. I see them being closer to at least an 8 or 9 win season. Because I go and I think the toughest games you really have on your schedule are probably going to be Alabama and Texas A&M. And if you can at least take care of one of those games, you take care of South Carolina, and you don't have too many upsets, I don't really see a scenario where they don't win at least 9, 10 games this season.